How's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Digital Health Podcast. My name is Anthony Virgo. We have an amazing show for you guys today. If this is your first episode, and you don't know anything about the Digital Health Podcast, I'm here to let you know. Again, my name is Anthony Virgo. I spent the last 7 years at a health tech startup, and then we transitioned into starting our own AI automation and SEO company within healthcare with my partner, Kazar. Unfortunately, Kazar isn't able to make it on this episode, but we're still going to have an amazing one. We have our guest today, Julie. Julie, go ahead and introduce yourself for the listeners here.
Thank you, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here and such a privilege, so thank you for that. My name is Julie Marshall. I'm based in the UK. I'm a psychotherapist and also a psychosexual therapist. Absolutely love my job. I deal with a lot of a range of issues that people bring to therapy. So it could be things like vaginismus, dyspareunia, erectile dysfunction, gender dysphoria. Work with a diverse range of clients, gender diverse, sexually diverse, and neurodiverse. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Got it. First and foremost, just want to say thank you for being open and spending your time for being on the podcast. I know even being all the way in the UK, we're on different time zones, so we definitely thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So we usually want to dive deep with our guests and understand how did they actually come into this industry or their industry, in the way that they want to serve people. So how did you kind of bit the bug and knew that you wanted to go down this journey in serving people in the way that you do? The reason why we ask, because we know, if we talk about healthcare in any spectrum, there's so many different avenues you could go. You could be a primary care doctor. You could be a behavioral health therapist, a psychiatrist. You could be a dentist. So how did you know that you wanted to, pursue this industry as a whole, and then how did you make your direction?
Well, it's very kind of complex in a way. I mean, there's just so many, there's such a diverse range of avenues that you can definitely explore. I was in finance actually for 30 years.
Wow.
But
Okay.
when I was 19, I met an old school friend, and he said to me, what do you do for a living? And I said I was a sex therapist. Never thought I would actually become a sex therapist. So I did finance for 30 years, absolutely loved it, and then thought to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. So I retrained. I'm a late psychotherapist in the field. I'm quite a novice. I've only been practicing for 10 years in this field. But I absolutely love my job. But what happened really was I kind of decided to retrain, became a psychotherapist, did a degree in psychotherapy. And then I was going to go on and do the masters, but my supervisor said to me, "Hey, they're doing a master's in psychosexual therapy." And I thought I might as well go along, not expecting to get in. And I actually got in, did the masters, and here I am, 10 years later, and I'm a psychosexual therapist. So I kind of fell into it. But I think, going back to the age of 19, I think it was more of an unconscious process maybe that, maybe I did want this as a career, but, I wish I'd done it sooner, but maybe I wasn't ready. Who knows?
Wow, that's an amazing story, because when we do talk to people, there's people that's like on a straight and narrow path. They know that, hey, I want to grow up and become a doctor, and this is what I want to do. And then there's people like you and I who were in different industries and then came into, healthcare. You've been in finance for so long and then coming here is like simply amazing. I was in the car business, but I was only in the car business for about 2 years or so, and then I came into healthcare. Which is like a so different dynamic. So let me ask, are there any transferable skills from finance into what you're doing now?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Could you share a little, like, what have you learned along the way that has transitioned into helping you serve people the way you do?
I think, in terms of the finance, it was always around structure, having meeting deadlines, communicating with different types of people. So all of those skills are really transferable into the world of psychotherapy, really. But, one thing that I did notice was that, when I was in meetings in finance, I was always the one that was listening. I was empathic, really supportive. And I think those skills, again, are skills that you need to be a psychotherapist, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So what is a misconception about like sex therapy or or if you talk about therapy in general, there's this stigma that, or it traditionally has always had a stigma where some people weren't even open to therapy at all, or, maybe people thought you were crazy if you talked to a therapist. But and then you add sex as a layer on top of that, I can only imagine. So what is like one misconception that the average person might not know about that, and maybe like the type of people who might actually need your services?
I think there's so many misconceptions, isn't there? There's so many myths, and there's a lot of shame and stigma around, talking about sex. I don't think, sex, we don't normalize conversations around it a lot, but, going back historically, it was, you laid on the couch and you're seen by a therapist, and, the therapist would be making notes and not talking and just listening, and you would have to share everything. But that's not what therapy is about. Therapy is about very much a collaborative process, coming in and talking and just sharing, what you really want. And I always say to clients, the more you can share, the better it's going to be. Another misconception about sex therapy is that I think about people having sex while they're talking about it. So I don't think about what the client's going to be doing after the session in terms of sexual intimacy. Absolutely not. I'm thinking about, how I can support this client, and, are there any resources that I can help with them with? How can I support them in this space? I deal with a lot of, I don't deal with, rather, that's the wrong word. I specialize in supporting people around compulsive sexual behaviors and neurodivergent people. I see a lot of neurodivergent people. I'm neurodivergent myself, so sometimes it's really difficult, to hold that gaze, when I'm talking to you. So sometimes I might look away, and it's just, about creating the right environment, and it's allowing the clients to have that space, because sometimes clients come and think they can't have the space to talk, or they daren't share what they want to share. But I say, we invite curiosity, and let's do that together, and just, make it very much a collaborative process. And yes, there is shame and stigma attached to it, but the more we talk about it, the more it's going to be normalized. I mean, when I was training to be a sex therapist, I was like, oh my goodness, I can talk to guys about masturbation because, it's very normalized. It's okay for men to masturbate, but there's a lot of stigma around, and, societal discourse around female masturbation. I think we're getting better now as a society about addressing it and talking about it. But when I was training, it's like, how am I going to talk to another woman about, female masturbation? Because for me, and I don't mind sharing, there was just so much shame around it. I was brought up never, this is wrong. You're not allowed to do those things. But hey, why not? Women can have pleasure just as much as men can have pleasure. And it's about really, allowing people to see that, it's okay to want to engage in solo activities if you want to, or not. It's entirely up to the person. Yeah. I don't know if it was helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1000%. And I think you said a few things that I think, like, just how are you inviting the curiosity? I would ask, like, how, being that it already has this stigma or these misconceptions, how do you yourself invite people or share resources or advocate for people to actually, seek, sex therapy? What is that like? Or say, for example, I might be in a session with you and I'm closed off. How is it to open up to you?
Yeah. Well, when I speak to a client, it's about really just kind of creating the right environment, especially a neurodivergent person. So it's about, is the lighting okay, especially online or face to face, in terms of scents and smells, and just making sure the safe is really, safe, so that, and comfortable for them. So that is one thing. But also, if a client is closed off in a sense, or I felt that they were closed off, again, that's a misconception, isn't it? I might be assuming that they're closed off. So I really need to check that my own biases and assumptions out there, because especially a neurodivergent person may appear to be closed off, but actually they might not be. It might be just their way of being. That's how they they are as a person, and that's absolutely fine. Everybody has different kind of cognitive functioning and different processes, and it's just being really curious about that. So I would be saying, what's happening for you now? Tell me about it. And and even explicitly saying, I'm inviting curiosity. How would you feel about that if I invite curiosity? Are you comfortable with that or not? And I also say to clients things like is that something you want to talk about? And they might say yes or no, and that's absolutely fine. If I felt there was a little bit resistance to that, I would say, well, would you like to maybe talk about it in another session? You can do, or you don't have to. It's entirely up to you. But also, if I think it was important to talk about or kind of bring up, I would say something around, I think it might be helpful, but you might not, but that's okay. Maybe have a think about it, go away and process it. If you come back next session and want to talk about it, that's absolutely fine. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Got it.
It's
So
just being, allowing them to be themselves and, just being curious.
right, I was gonna say
Yeah.
allowing them to be open or taking ownership of opening up and being in that session.
Giving them
Now,
autonomy, isn't it? Really.
right,
An
a thousand
agency.
percent.
Yeah.
Right, a
Yeah.
1,000%. Now we're I want to shift a little bit to like technology, like within healthcare, and maybe how you're using it, because in being open and in actually like, sitting with a therapist or seeking these sessions, we now have a concept called telehealth, which wasn't really big a few years back. I got into healthcare right when it was like a new concept. And, before the pandemic, I was like, nobody's going to talk to their doctor or therapist on the computer. That's never going to happen. I really didn't see it being a real thing. Post pandemic now, where we're live, and that's almost the norm, or it's a second form of actually providing a therapy session or a session in itself. How are you seeing people on a day to day? Is it more so on site, or are you more so virtually? And are you finding it that people are more opening up in the comfort of their own home, or is it more impactful to be sitting down in person with somebody?
I do a hybrid. I mean, I love the relational stuff, the face-to-face stuff, because it's that felt sense of really getting to really feel and of what is happening in the room, the dynamics between you and the other person. But also I enjoy the online sessions as well. I never used to do online until, COVID lockdown and all of those things. So obviously I transitioned to online, which was really difficult to start with, but I think over time I kind of got used to it. People can open up, or be closed off as or they may appear closed off in any types, whether that's face to face or online. There's something called the online disinhibition effect. So what that is, it's something around sometimes people online can overshare and share more than because they're maybe in the comfort of their own surroundings, hope nobody's around, and they can share what they want to share, and they feel more comfortable doing that. So we have to be really careful around what they're actually sharing in terms of online as well, because sometimes they can overshare. But technology has really impacted our field in terms of more online sessions and maybe telephone sessions, but also in terms of AI. I deal with sexual intimacy and compulsive sexual behaviors. So in terms of AI, I've seen in the last year maybe myself see clients come and say, well, I've used Chat GPT, and that's kind of helped me over the weekend. So and also the internet has, since the boom of the internet, it's more prevalent now than ever, isn't it? Everybody uses a internet on a daily basis. More and more people are watching the porn, accessing porn, OnlyFans, and all the websites, etc. So a lot more people are coming in as perceiving themselves to have compulsive sexual behaviors or sex addiction or whatever they want to call it. Everybody calls it something different. There's so many contentious issues around, what to call it. But, I honor what the client talks about. But AI has definitely changed, psychotherapy, and it's impacted it. And, it's got pros and cons, I would say. I would never tell anybody not to use it, but it doesn't have that nuanced AI can generate responses, but it doesn't know the context around it, the nuance around it. It hasn't got that relational aspect. And I think obviously that part is missing in terms of AI. But yeah, it's definitely changed the field. Yeah.
1,000%. That's a good segue into, what I was gonna bring up, which is AI in healthcare, right? Like you brought up so many great points there that, we still need humans to do specific things, obviously, but there's pros and cons of anything, right? When telehealth came, there were pros and cons, but if you're thinking about the service providers or people in healthcare, we were able to adapt and make use of, this technology to, benefit, you know what I mean? In some instances, you think, a person like me, I live in, New York City, where now I don't have to jump on a train and take two buses to go see a therapist. And, by the time I sit with my therapist, I'm talking to you about what happened on the train, not what I wanted to come to you about. You know what I mean? Versus now I could just do it from the comfort of my own,
Well, yeah.
segue. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, AI, can be so helpful because,
Mhm.
there's people out there who can't access the therapy. They can't get to the sessions. They may have a disability or they're feeling lonely or isolated. And the only way, or one of the ways that they, connect is through the digital, isn't it? Absolutely. So it can have some benefits. There's also, a neurodivergent person actually coming to a session, catching a train, like you say, on maybe New York or in the UK, that can be really stressful for them. So coming to a session face to face is they're going to be overwhelmed, they're going to be stressed, they're already, in a place where of maybe emotional dysregulation, and that's not a good way. So it's about, okay, what's going to be helpful for you? Do you want to do online sessions, or would you prefer it? And often, people who can't access, my therapy room, do the online sessions for a number of reasons. So, it can be really helpful,
Right, right,
Mm.
definitely. And one thing what we usually say, because a lot of what we do for our clients in the healthcare industry is we build, AI receptionists to do intake or do appointments and things like that.
Mm.
A lot of repetitive tasks, insurance verification. So we'll set up an agent to actually do a lot of that stuff, to answer the phone calls,
Mm.
really to optimize what they're doing in person, right? So they don't even have to worry about
Mm.
answering the calls or even documenting notes. We set up agents that transcribe notes, and then it supports with helping, clinicians or, providers be more present. They don't have to worry too much. Like, obviously you want to do your documentation properly. But now you have an agent supporting you in doing that so you could then be more present. I think that's a good benefit in AI, and a lot of our clients are benefiting through using it as a tool. And the reason why I say you got to use it as a tool, because everyone know how to use a hammer, but not everyone can build a house, right? I don't know how to build a house. I know how to use a hammer, but
People don't
I'm
want to
gonna
build a house. They want to build something different. Absolutely. Yeah.
exactly. They might use the hammer for something else. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But there's so many different ways where you could use the tool, and it's about using the tool to your advantage. And the good thing about what we do is we do healthcare. We do AI within healthcare, and the reason why we do it within healthcare is because we have that background, right? I'm already, when I'm building an agent or doing automation, I'm already think about HIPAA compliance and things like that. When someone else is building it outside of healthcare, they don't have that layer of knowledge or internal, patient experience. They don't know that Mrs. Jones might be on the verge of an eviction or haven't eaten anything nutrition for her diabetes and things like that. So, we oftentimes we say, in learning AI, you want to find the right AI partners and stuff like that. What is your perception about the other providers or clinicians or therapists in the UK? Are they adopting AI? Are they using it a lot more frequently, or are people still kind of shut off about it or skeptical?
I think there's a mix, really. Some
Mix.
people are very traditional. That can be a generational thing, or it can be just a personal choice, isn't it, really, about what they want to do. At the minute, I'm using the old fashioned way, the diary, doing my clinical notes, but I am also in talks with, an app provider who can provide all of that. So I can, my time is less focused on the admin and more focused on doing the client work, which is the work that I absolutely love. Yeah. And also going back to the tools, the analogy that you use there, it's great that we can use it as a tool, but it's knowing its limitations as well, isn't it? We really need to understand that, what it can do for us, but also the limitations around it as well. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Julie, this has been an amazing episode. We usually wrap up by asking two last questions here. One is, what's the best way for people to reach out to you or connect with you, just in case they wanted a session or they
Mhm.
heard something that you said on the podcast and just want to say, hey, I loved what you said there. What's the best way for people to connect with you? And then what's one powerful message you want to leave with our listeners? It could be anything personally that we talked about today, or anything from your journey.
Oh gosh. Well, they can access my website or my email. My website is psychotherapydoncaster.co.uk, or you can email me at psychotherapydoncaster@gmail.com. So thank you for allowing me to do that. That's really nice. And one message: go and have great sex, whatever that looks like. And, you know, sex doesn't have to involve penetration. There's so many different ways to have sex without penetration. So go and enjoy and explore, be curious, and have fun.
Amazing, amazing. I love that. Thank you so much for your time
You're
today.
welcome.
Appreciate it.